Okay, let's have a look at the source text analysis part of this seminar. So in her text called Text Analysis in Translation, produced in 1988, Christiane Nord, who's one of the key functionalist theorists, presents a more detailed model of textual analysis, which examines what she calls text organisation, both at and above sentence level. So at sentence level basically means looking at the words on the page. Above sentence level looks at where the text operates beyond the page, if you like. So she comes up with two basic types of translation product and process: documentary translation and instrumental translation. So documentary translation, the easiest way to describe this is that it would serve as some kind of documentation of source culture communication between author and source text recipient. And the best example of this is a literary translation, where the target text is allowing the target reader to access the ideas of the source text, but where, and this is the crucial part, the reader is aware that it is a translation. So there's no fooling the reader here that this text was originally produced in the target language. The reader is aware when they pick up the book that it was originally written by, Marquez or someone like that, and they're reading it in English. An instrumental translation, on the other hand, is like a fully domesticated translation that acts as if it were written in the target language originally. So if you think about it, a computer manual, or any manual for that matter, users want to read that as if it were constructed originally in their language. So a documentary translation, more likely to be source text oriented, more likely to be foreignized. An instrumental translation would be very target text oriented and more domesticated. Now, the importance of the translation brief before you do a source text analysis is that the translator needs to be able to compare what Nord calls the source text and target text profiles to see where the two texts might diverge. So what are the intended text functions? Who are the addressees? Time and place of text reception, as we noted when we looked at the Mein Kampf example. The time and the place of the text reception can be very, very important in being aware of the actual brief. The medium, we often see this when speeches are translated. A speech is obviously written originally to be read out, but when it's translated, it's often done so in order to be a document of that event. So it's often translated to be written. Sometimes, of course, speeches are translated also to be read out, but the medium might change. And the motive, so why the source text was written and why it is being translated. So once these profiles have been compared, the source text can be analysed so that the translator can decide on whether in fact this is a feasible translation. Can I do it? Looking at the most relevant source text items that need to be taken into account to achieve functionalism. So what are the key aspects of this text that might be problematic? Are there lots of references to things that might be unfamiliar to target readers? Is the structure different? Might the structure need to be changed in order for that text to be functional in its target culture context? Those kinds of things. And then very importantly, you need to come up with a translation strategy that will help you fulfill that brief. This means making decisions. So as a translator, you need to get very good at making decisions. And one of the reasons we expose you to so much theory of translation is because this theory can help you to become a better and more confident decision maker. Now, Nord stresses that this is not the only way in which you can undertake a source text analysis. It doesn't really matter how you do it, but you need to do it. And I would stress that as well. It's like I always say to my translation students, the first 3 times you read the source text, you need to sit on your hands. Don't pick up a pen, don't type on a keyboard, just read that text, and you need to analyse that text and all of their source text items before you even start translating. Then you can go and start underlining things, picking up issues that might be problematic, but you must do a source text analysis in order to be able to pick up on these key aspects that will be pivotal in your translation strategy. So Nord's model asked us to look, and this again is detailed in the Monday textbook, look at the subject matter, content, presuppositions, text composition, non-verbal elements, lexis, sentence structure, and suprasegmental features. And we'll be going through these in more detail in our workshop when we'll be undertaking a source text analysis together, so I won't go into them now. So nearly at the end now, what this does is also allow us to create a functional hierarchy of translation problems. So we would call this a top-down approach, and that simply means we look at the more kind of macro issues and then get to the micro. So a macro approach, of course, is looking at the functions, deciding if it's documentary or instrumental, which basically means, are we going to foreignise this or are we going to domesticate it? In very simplistic terms, that's basically the approach. Is this going to be more source text oriented or more target text oriented? How will the different functions, if there are different or similar functions, shape our translation strategy? Analyse the brief, think about the things that might need to be changed, to look at the translation style, depending on whether the translation will be more documentary or instrumental. And then you can get to those micro textual levels. So going from the macro to the micro, it's only then that you look at those kind of specific problems of the text, the words, the sentences, etc. Okay, so in terms of training functional translators, I just wanted to run through a few things that again come up in the Scopus theory and in the functional approach that are very, very important for you to know as trainee translators. So it's not just about linguistic competence. Yes, you need to know your language A and your language B, but you also need to know about the cultures out of which and into which you are translating. So of course it always helps if you've been to those countries where your language is spoken, or the particular country that your language is spoken in. Or there are other ways that you can make sure that you maintain intercultural competence. That means reading the newspapers in your language pair on a daily basis, engaging with culture, knowing what's going on. All of this stuff will help you to become a much more competent translator. Interestingly, you need to have a very good command of your native language. So most trainee translators think, oh, my B language isn't good enough. I need to really work on my B language. But think about the fact that you're translating into your A language. So you're actually constructing texts. So in my case, my A language is English. So I move into English when I'm translating. So I need to know exactly what the norms and conventions of communication in English are. So you need to make also sure that you look at parallel texts, and we'll be talking about those in our workshop, using parallel text to assist you in creating an understanding of what these norms and conventions are. General text competence, I probably don't need to explain. General education, again, this kind of speaks to that idea of knowing what's going on in the world. Who's the president of this country? What some key issues that are going on globally are, etc., etc. Ability to use traditional and modern translation aids, so that means you might need use your paper dictionary sometimes. You'll obviously be using a lot of online dictionaries. You might be using computer-assisted translation tools. All of these things together will also make you a better functional translator. Research competence, so translators need to be very, very good researchers, because you will always come across things that you don't really know much about. Students who have to translate, for example, a vacuum cleaner manual often have to go home and deconstruct their vacuum in order to understand exactly what goes where and how it works, etc. Similarly, if you're asked to translate a particularly difficult scholarly text, it might involve you doing some research in that particular area as well. So you need to get used to having to do research outside of the translation. Stress resistant, of course, there are a lot of timelines that are imposed on you as a translator, and that's one of the reasons in this course that we also impose quite a lot of short tasks that help you prepare for the kind of work that you might be doing in the industry. And also self-reflection, and this is a big part not only of the theoretical component of what you do, but also of the practical component of what you do. You need to understand why you're making certain decisions and be able to justify those. There aren't too many criticisms of the Scopus theory. It's one that really helped drive translation studies into the contemporary realm that it exists today, and Scopus is certainly one that is very useful for practitioners to use. One criticism, though, is that it doesn't pay enough attention to the linguistic nature of the source text and to the reproduction of those micro-level features. As you might remember in the Rice and Vermeer 5 rules, that was the one that came down the bottom, so that was deemed the least important in their categorisation of the rules of the functionalist approach. However, they are still taken into consideration, so it's not entirely accurate to say that there isn't enough attention paid to those aspects. And nor does tackle these issues when she talks about her translation-oriented textual analysis. So they're something she tried to overcome when she provided that model for source text analysis. Okay, to finish now, I'm going to offer up a discussion which I'd like again you to make notes on and bring to the workshop. So this is an example perhaps of an essay question you might come up with, a way for you to think about a little bit further about some of the aspects we've been discussing in this seminar. So in the process of dethroning the source text, there were suddenly numerous social agents involved. And Tim... I said Tim. Okay. Okay, I'd like to end on a discussion point, and again, please bring your detailed notes to the workshop. In the process of dethroning the source text, there were suddenly numerous social agents involved in the translation process. Pim takes issue with the fact that the properly trained translator is made the expert in solving problems to do with translation and should be left to decide on issues such as being asked to translate in a morally questionable way. So I'd like you to consider this discussion point and to take this back to you and some of the kind of things we've been talking about in our workshops, your role as the translator. So how does this make you feel as the translator? How do you feel being put into this situation as Pim describes it? What problems or benefits might you expect? Where does this place the issue of loyalty in translation? And can you find any other theorists that present things differently or put the onus on a different player, not the translator, in this process?